Who's that? Oh, that's in our house. That's not the classroom. What is that?
There are a few other people.
Yeah, now we should have. I think that's now.
Yeah. Do you hear us?
Well, they're all muted.
Oh, there. Oh, so they would know.
Where the hell is now muted?
Okay.
I think
Yes, we hear. Yes.
he's muted. I should. He's unmuted.
Yes, Malka.
Yeah. Are you all there? You hear me?
Yes.
Irene is here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Can she see me?
Yes.
Oh, then I would say hello to her.
I know. Hey, very.
Picture, oh, yeah.
Oh, Henry. Great to
So
see
happy
you.
to see you. You hear us?
Hello, Malka.
Yeah,
Hi.
great. So good.
I'm home now. I cannot come to the class because I fell. I broke
Hi,
my
babe.
back.
Hi, babe.
I was 5 weeks in rehab
Oh my God.
home, but I want to listen to your class.
All right.
Thank God. I
Okay.
talked to your daughter. I'm so happy to talk to her.
All right. Pleasure.
Online.
I didn't
All
know
right.
that.
Super. So what I'm going to do today,
Yeah.
guys, we're going to be doing the Jews of Holland. I don't know. Some of you hopefully.
Oh, why do you want that?
Wait, how do we? Do you know how to mute yourself?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. All right. If you could all just mute yourself. So again, you'll listen to a minute. So if you can find, okay, just give these out. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 of you so far. Thank you. Okay, so there are a few people online, which is good. I don't necessarily see them, but hopefully they do hear me. And again, we're going to do the Jews of Holland, which I think is very interesting. Mostly it's the 17th century we're going to be dealing with. Okay, what I'm going to do first, I'm going to give you some background information about life in Holland, and then have the Jews ultimately go. Now, the first Jews to go are basically those Spanish Portuguese Jews. Those are the ones who will emigrate and settle in Holland. But why? Why did they go there? All right. Because we know when a lot of them left initially, many of them, well, some went to North Africa, some then went to Italy, and then a very large number ended up going to the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire includes obviously not just Turkey, parts of the Middle East and Israel. All right. A number of them might have settled, let's say, in Constantinople. And then eventually they found their way to Israel. All right. So just a little bit about the Netherlands. It was originally part of what's called the Frankish and Holy Roman Empire. We tend to think of the Holy Roman Empire more a bit Germany, but it did cover part of France, just part of it. I mean, there was a French king this whole time, but a part of it does belong to the Holy Roman Empire. And apparently this Duke of Burgundy would be, again, France took charge in 1433. And when we talk about the Netherlands, it's, excuse me. All right, so we talk about the Netherlands, we're talking about not just what we today would call Holland, or what is today called the Netherlands. It also included Belgium, Luxembourg, and again, part of the region of France. All right, that's what we said. The Netherlands, it included several of those countries. And they were under this rule of the Holy Roman Emperor from 1433 to 1581. And we'll okay. Sorry, just getting out sheets. Okay, but I'm back here. But in 1581, there was actually a revolt among the Dutch. Because yeah. So now let's pick our minds back. Remember, originally it was just one church, the Catholic Church. And then in the 1500s, that's where the Protestant movement began. And it had several different sects within Protestantism. Apparently, most of the people living in Holland decided they wanted to be Protestant. And their particular branch of Protestantism is Calvinism. And among those Calvinists, you know, it's also going to affect the Puritans, and they're going to bring that to the U.S., right? Well, more so the United States, but you know, that part of North America where people can settle, and then where the Puritans were among the earliest group to come to North America. Belgium remains mostly Catholic, and I believe that is still true to this day. Most Belgians are Catholic. Most Dutchmen are Protestant, okay? And their branch of Protestantism is Calvinism. At least Calvinism. They don't seem to ever smile very much. But if you go to Holland, which I was in many, many years ago, the people actually were very friendly. So eventually becomes what's called then the Dutch Republic. And they reached the height of their powers. You know, they were colonists. They settled other areas, and that's in the year 1667. All right, so let's bear in mind everything, right? Jews are expelled from Spain. Most of them actually go first to Portugal. 1497, there was an edict of expulsion, but most of them, the king forcibly converts them so that they will remain in the country because they're very good businessmen and bring wealth to Portugal. And it is the Portuguese Jews, right, who will be mostly the ones who are going to emigrate out to other things where they feel that they could live a more open Jewish life. And so one of the places that they're going to go, you have to understand, is Holland. Why? Because it became, first of all, they themselves were expanding their wealth. So they welcomed the Jews who were businessmen and that import-export business and had connections all over the world. Well, the known world. Well, at that point, right, the known world is the whole world. And they themselves, you know, they had thrown off that yoke of Catholicism of the Roman Empire. And they were, as a result, they were more tolerant, you know, welcoming people who had other beliefs. And that's how the Jews will eventually come and say, we'll do it when I come to that sheet, but I just wanted to give you the overall picture. Okay, now, so what does this have to do with Spain or Portugal, or what it was where the Holy Roman Emperor was Charles V. We had discussed him before in regard to Germany, right? Other countries. Not only was considered the ruler of the Holy Roman Emperor, he's also considered the king of Spain. So even conversos might have been initially attracted to Holland, even though they have to live undercover, right? They can't live openly as Jews, but because it's under Spanish rule, so that they are initially attracted to go there. Again, they would know the language. You know, I'm sure obviously eventually they will learn the Dutch language, which is very similar to German. But again, we're talking about a very small number. But eventually, as I say, once Holland overthrew the yoke, right, of the Catholic Holy Roman Emperor, and then they decided to leave Protestant lives, then for sure, then the Jews were more than happy to emigrate there because they themselves could then live openly as Jews. Already there were already some there, already some conversos who've gone there, and now there's going to be an even greater influx of conversos. Okay, apparently it took them like 80 years to totally overthrow that yoke of Spain. So just to give you a picture, I spent a year in Israel, my junior year of college, and on my way back, I was traveling with a friend who came from South Africa, and she had some relatives who lived in Amsterdam. So we stayed with them. There were these two like maiden aunts, who had lived through the Holocaust. I'm not sure how they survived, but they did. And they had a house that was from, let's say, the 16th century, 16th, 17th century. I don't know if any of you have been to Holland. If you ever went to a house, the steps are like this. They are, I don't think I could do it today. They're extremely steep steps. So the lowest level they had was actually a shop of like antiquities. They had a lot of Judaica things. There also was a beautiful silver shop. And from, just from this, I know how. Talking about the Jews of today. All right. And then you go up a number of steps and you came, it reminds you of Sholom's house. It was like one room proof floor. And you came to their kitchen area. And they showed me there was a door there, a secret door, because during the time when Spain was ruling over Holland and people wanted to have their own Protestant church, as opposed to the Catholic Church, which was ruling church at the time, would these Spanish soldiers come in because they heard that they were gathering to pray to the Protestant religion? They was a way for them to escape. So it's really quite interesting. And you have mattresses there, like yay stick. So I remember when I come to Holland and we came up to our level, with my friend and I did. This big, fluffy, this nice thick mattress and fluffy comforter and pillows. It was so nice. And then you open the window and you face the canal. It was really lovely. But I found it intriguing that there was this passageway. I don't think I understood about this conflict of religion. Okay. Let me just make sure there's anything general. Just so in general, what's called the golden age of Holland. This is the age of exploration. Came into conquered various territories, and that's in the 17th century, which will be the heyday for the Jews, right? Also going to now come. They can live openly as Jews. They find refuge in Holland, and that's why they flocked to go there. And most of them, you have to understand, these are Portuguese Jews. I think I've explained this before. They're called Spanish Portuguese Jews. Obviously, originally, most of them were Spanish Jews. But those Jews who decided to remain in Spain. They're living lives, and their ties to Judaism are going to diminish. But those Jews who opted to leave Spain that time to go to Portugal, they really wanted to hold on to their original religion. They did not want to lead secret lives. So even though they were forcibly converted by the king, their ties to Judaism were much stronger than any Jews who might have remained. So they are the ones who are the conversos, meaning that they are outwardly living Catholic lives, but secretly they're leading Jewish lives. Now, I'm not to say that there weren't any Spanish Jews who also eventually managed to escape, but it's mostly Portuguese Jews. And if you go to any of the countries where they found refuge, their cemeteries, go to any place in the Caribbean that was set up, the gravestones are all written in Portuguese. So she's really quite fascinating. Oh, and this Dutch Republic, which I told you was founded in the year 1581, it lasted up to 1790. It was considered a confederation. And we'll talk about trade. So there are these, either it was the Dutch East India Company, that was the one that would have gone like to Suriname, all those in the East, that where they set up colonies. But the Dutch West India Company, those are the ones who will go to the Americas, the Caribbean, and also the top part of South America, right? But why do they come to America again? If they're coming from Portugal, because they figure, well, we're thousands of miles away now, then they can lead free and open lives as Jews. But within Holland itself, they are also leading lives openly, as Jews. Okay. I'm covering everything I wanted to tell you. Okay. We're discussing Americans today. At one point I'll give you a lecture, just to tell you about how the Jews settled in the Americas. But then we're going to start in Holland, because many of those Jews who then went to the New World were actually the Dutch Jews. Originally, they're Portuguese Jews. They're still speaking Portuguese. So just understand that's their original heritage, and that's why I get the gravestones. If you I haven't had a chance to go very far in the Caribbean, but I know from people who have been there that, again, in their cemeteries, any document that will date back to that 17th century, even into the 18th century, they're all written in Portuguese. Okay, so now let's focus more on the Jews of Holland, and then I have information with some of the Rishonim who lived in these various areas. So you can just follow along with me, okay? And I will read you. So it says, while the Jews of Germany and Italy remained in their ghetto prison, right, because there were ghettos, right, already at this time period, for another century and a half, and while the Jews of Poland drew deeper into themselves, again, that's going to be a whole unit that will go on, classes, new communities came into being in the Netherlands and England. So I'll tie this in eventually with England. There they enjoy comparative freedom while helping these countries grow in prosperity and culture. That was the reason to begin with why that Portuguese king wanted the Jews to stay, because we were so heavily involved with commerce all over the world. And so that's why countries eventually will accept the Jews and let them live openly Jewish life, because they're adding to the prosperity of their new countries, right? Well, we discussed this a little, but now just a little more. In the late Middle Ages, the Netherlands fell into the hands of the Habsburg family, Emperor Charles V. These would be how old? 1500 to 1588. Ruled over these provinces as he did over Spain, Germany, and Austria. That's a pretty vast region. All right. Yeah. The Dutch stayed under Spanish domination, since many Netherlanders were attracted to Protestantism. I told you, and it's Calvinism. That's the particular sect of Protestantism, right, that the Dutch people, right, accepted. The Spanish administration tried to uproot the new religion and to introduce the Inquisition into their land. So as though any converso who might have made his way there was like tricky. You know, you'd be really careful to cover up the Jewish. Under the leadership of William Orange, there began a tremendous struggle against Spain, where the Protestants emerged victorious. A small number of Jews had lived in Holland some centuries earlier, but they had been expelled. After 1492, however, the conversos, again, these are people who they are so openly leading lives as Catholics, but they are secretly practicing Judaism to whatever extent they can, you can imagine. They were anxious to return to the faith of their forefathers, so they used Holland as a way station on their road to freedom. Holland was then one of Spain's provinces. From Holland, they would go to Italy, and from Italy to the Ottoman Empire. Remember when we learned about Donna Garcia Mendez, who was this very wealthy woman? She was a widow. She had lived in Portugal, and she actually goes for a little while to Antwerp, Belgium, still living secretly. And then she goes to Italy. Of course, it's definitely a Catholic country. And then from there, she makes her way to the Ottoman Constantinople. Okay, and there she lives. You know, they've been welcomed in by Caliph, I guess, whatever, the head of the Ottoman Empire, and there she can practice. They and any Jews who made their way there, again, they were welcome to come and to live outwardly Jewish lives. Even after Holland broke away from Spain, a thin but constant stream of conversos continued to flow there from lands dominated by the Inquisition. But it's well, you'll see, it's mostly those Portuguese Jews, those who really wanted to lead Jewish life. Not to say that many of them perhaps from Spain, but they were so far removed, you know, we're talking about a century later, and many of them really were living almost totally Catholic lives. Obviously, some families did hold on to the fact that they were originally Jewish about their practice of Judaism on this is quite many. But again, those Portuguese Jews, those are the ones who went to Portugal because they did not want to live in Spain. See, and remember, from 1492 to 1497, they did live openly as Jews in Portugal, just as, and the reason why, why was it edict of expulsion? Because the king, I don't remember well, he wanted to marry the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. His daughter's name was Isabella, and she insisted before she would marry him that he had to expel all the Jews. But as I told you, for business reasons, he did not want to expel them. So that's why they were gathered in this huge square in Lisbon. To this day, there's some sort of a little plaque there that talks about it, and they were forcibly converted. But the king couldn't have cared less, so until the Inquisition came, which was in 1531 to Portugal, no one was bothering them for the fact that they were, again, it was semi-secret, leading Jewish lives. But once the Inquisition was, from then on, that's when they want to leave out of even Portugal. All right. Okay. So again, we're talking about some of them again. We're not talking about a huge number, but they are gradually going to be attracted to go to Holland, especially once that yoke of the Holy Roman Empire and Spain, when that country becomes totally, openly Protestant, they get rid of Catholic Spain. So then the Jews are also, it was more a country that treasured tolerance. Okay, around the year 1600, that permitted the conversion to practice their Judaism. Can you imagine what a relief this was to any Jews who were living there? Again, everything up until now was subterfuge. This, even, now that the country is Protestant, but they weren't yet ready to accept the Jews as openly, practicing Jews. But by the time 1600, remember, it was 1581 when the Dutch threw off the yoke of Spain. But again, it's not till that year 1600, where again the Jews can live freely. The victory did not come about all at once, as you could imagine. Things didn't go piecemeal. Attempts to prevent the open practice of Judaism took place during the first half of the 17th century. However, these were just temporary setbacks. Early in the 17th century, we're talking about the 1600s, a synagogue was established in Israel, and ground was acquired for a cemetery. And I know, like Shevet Israel in New York City, it's interesting. That's one of the first things that had to be established was a Jewish cemetery. And should you go to Rhode Island, where the Truro Synagogue is, also they have, it's like I think it's like 2 blocks from where the show is. They also have a cemetery. And again, the stones would be written in Portuguese, all right? Not Dutch, they would be written in Portuguese. Okay, attempts to prevent the open rights person. Early in the 17th century, a synagogue right was established and ground for a cemetery. Unaccustomed to united Jewish action, the Jews began to quarrel among themselves. I never, right? That's hard. There always are different factions. No, you can do it this way. No, we can do it that way. Whatever. For a while, there was more than one congregation. And it would take about a handful of Jews, you know, maybe there are 200 Jews, whatever. However, after the influx of German Ashkenazic Jews, the Spanish Portuguese Jews wanted to present a united front. So those Jews in Germany, you know, these are the ones who have been forced to live in ghettos. And remember, we had learned they had been expelled from province to province, a tremendous upheaval. This is the time period of the 30 Years' War, which is 1681 to 1684. And they, their lives are miserable. They've become impoverished. Many of them obviously will go eastward toward Poland, you know, Lithuania, but some are going to trickle westward and settle in Holland as well. And we're talking mostly about the city of Atlanta. The havoc of mentioned the 30 Years' War induced a number of German Jews to migrate to this land of freedom. From that time forward, Amsterdam had 2 distinct Jewish communities, the Sephardic and the Ashkenazi. Each had its own rabbi, school, cemetery, and separate communal officials. That's unbelievable. They cooperated only in the larger Jewish matter. You know, something that affected all the Jews. Otherwise, the Sephardim kept the Ashkenazim at a distance. And so it's interesting, isn't that Spanish Portuguese call a lot of themselves, you know, they're a very cultured group, you know, and they don't have anything to do with those poor people, right, coming in from Germany. Otherwise, the Sephardim kept the Ashkenazim as a distance, looked down upon them, and went so far as to consider it a disgrace to intermarry with them. They didn't want anything to do. That's sort of what happened in the Americas, right? Because the first Jews to come are Spanish, Portuguese Jews, but eventually, right, Jews from Germany are going to emigrate to the Americas, but they each stuck to their own customs. Yes, exactly. The Sephardim of Holland were descendants of families which for some generations had been counted among the nobility. Right? They were quite, look, most of them I'm sure were lower class or middle class, but there was a very sizable number of very wealthy people in Spain and Portugal, right? So they, you know, were pretty stuck up about themselves. So again, they were considered part of the nobility. They even had their own coats of arms. The Sephardim also retained a tradition of general culture. You know, they were very learned people. I'm not talking about strictly Judaic matters, but just in general, philosophy, history, these sciences. That's why many of them become medicine. Very, very fascinating. the German Jews that are more deeply steeped in Jewish learning, right? Because these are the ones who really hold on to their Jewish learning. They had yeshivas. This would, following right through from after the time period, Rashi, the Jews of Germany, they call them the Tosfos, right? Some of the times we actually were German Jews. Wait, just see where I was. The German Jews, though more deeply steeped in Jewish thought, did not relate to the grand self-possession of the Sephardim. They also differed economically. So they're coming in, they're poor people, right? Obviously, eventually they do well for themselves, but not initially. And again, the Spanish Portuguese, like white boy, and they frown upon them, unfortunately. The Sephardi Jews, on escaping from Spain or Portugal, had been able to bring along a portion of their family wealth. The Ashkenazi, which is interesting because when the Jews left Spain, they didn't come away with very much. But again, there were already some Portuguese Jews living there, and then again, maybe because of their prior connections, they could reconnect, with their business and trade interests. So a lot of them, were still people of means, whereas these Ashkenazi Jews, we had learned, oh my God, that's constant people in their lives, and they were rather poor. Right, they were leaving ghetto conditions and fleeing before armed enemies during a war, meaning that third war. And they arrived in Holland penniless. Consequently, the Sephardim were able to take part almost at once in the improving economic condition of Holland. And don't forget, remember originally as being ruled over by the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, who was also the King of Spain. So the language, even though we know Dutch is closer to German, but there was Spanish and Portuguese being spoken there initially. So that's why the Jews coming from that Iberian Peninsula, were able to make connections and be more comfortable with Holland. The Sephardim were able to take part almost at once in the improving economic conditions of Holland. And this is the age of exploration. Henry Hudson, right? Dutch, and then later the Amsterdam, right, is established. But will later be. What happened is after the 1654, 1620. We talk about Pilgrims, right? They came to America. There really was a small colony, Virginia. So what they called it, this new town they found, New Amsterdam. Remember, that's the time period of Peter Stuyvesant. He didn't want the Jews to come there, but he didn't know that in the Dutch West Indies Company, there were Jewish partners, and they say, you will allow these Jews to stay there and to practice their Judaism. And 10 years after, so the first Jews come in 1620, thank Pilgrims, right? 1654, first Jews. Some they were coming from Recife, Brazil, because at that point the Portuguese had taken it over and brought the Inquisition with them, so they were fleeing. I think their original intent was to go back to Holland, where most of them did, but there were these 23 Jews. They're on a boat somehow when off course. I have a feeling maybe in the area. They went off course. They ended up in Martinique, which was a French colony, and a captain of a ship in Martinique. They were Dutch citizens. He took them to New Amsterdam. So that's how we had our own beginnings. But 10 years later, the British took it over peacefully. They came in with their, all their boats, ships, and the Dutch gave it up, relinquished. It's Shalom told me this. It's so interesting. I told you some of the original Dutch colonies were actually in the northern part of South America, Curacao, Suriname. And apparently the wealthiest of these communities was Suriname, which is interesting. I mean, we're not thinking of Suriname as a wealthy place, but then, right, in the 1600s, it was because they had the sugar and they made the rum, it was coming. So that was the wealthiest thing. So they traded it with Britain. Too bad they didn't keep on to New Amsterdam, which became New York and flourished and definitely became the wealthiest of all those original colonies. But they gave up this part of their stronghold in South America. Okay, back to Holland. All right, yeah, we're in the 1600s already. Jews are starting to settle there in greater numbers. We even have German Jews who are coming to settle there, and life is good for the Jews. Again, they can live openly and have their own synagogues. Okay. As far as was widely approved methodology, the Dutch had begun to trade far and wide. We discussed this already. They had given up the stifling guild system also because the guild system, they only allowed their own people, and they were Christians. They didn't want any Jews, to go into the guild. But here it's being given up. They recognized that general prosperity demanded the free and unhampered activity of every able human being. I mean, it made sense. For heaven's sake, instead of persecuting people, take advantage of everybody can contribute toward the economy, to the growing prosperity of the land. And because the Jews did contribute so very heavily, especially when we think about, the New World, they're the ones who bring coffee back to trade to Holland, and it will spread then to other countries. This is before tea. They didn't have tea. They drank coffee, and they also are responsible for bringing in chocolate. So, and then the chocolate, you would go to these cafes. You would have a cup of chocolate or a cup of coffee. And there are other things. Obviously, the imports sugar, right, from sugar cane that grew in the world. So we're talking about more from parts of South America. Okay, this is where I'm up to. Okay, so the Portuguese Jews joined in the growing colonial trade. I'm sure some of them went to places, like Indonesia, but where again the Portuguese had colonies. But we're not talking about large Jewish communities. The larger ones, obviously, went westward to the Americas. They became important in the diamond industry. I always think of the diamond industry as being Belgium, right? Antwerp. But maybe in the early stages, it was more in Holland. Remember, at one point, it was like the Netherlands included Belgium and Holland. Okay. For centuries, they had all but a monopoly of it. I think they pretty much still have a pretty strong hold on it. But that's why in Israel, they have I don't remember where it is, but I remember going someplace like yes, near the Tel Aviv area. Okay. The rise of the Ashkenazim proceeded at a much slower rate. No, they didn't have the experience, the know-how, so it took them a while to improve economically. Within a short time, however, Jews of both communities were contributing materially to the general prosperity of the Netherlands. Consequently, there were no restrictions put on the Jews and their observing of Judaism. Okay, now we're going to learn a little bit more, and then I'll discuss some very key figures from 17th. The former conversos, having now obtained the right to practice Judaism openly, became strict observers of tradition, influenced by the Catholicism under which they had lived for centuries. They also insisted on religious piety expressed through specific ritual and observances. Things had to be done just so. We will talk about the Jews of England, but I told you about the Shalom Shul, Spanish Portuguese Shul, that is Mark's synagogue. They are much more like German Jews in that regard. Very stiff and proper hats. People are not talking in the show. The way unfortunately developed, at least in the US. They had their ritual. They say certain Tim, every day, regular. These people didn't go on for a while, And some of them are influenced also by Jews who went to Italy, especially there was a town up there called Livorno, which I think is right one. And from there, they also then found their way to Holland and or eventually England. Jews are coming to settle in both these countries around the same time period. Okay. First generation could not attain the more profound understanding of the traditions of the Jewish faith. Don't forget, look how many years, over 100 years, they have been conversant in Portugal, right? You know, how much teaching could go on just like at night, you know, under cover in a hidden room. So their level of and knowledge of observance of certain both, you know, would have been, you know, somewhat garbled. So that's why now you'll see how the German Jews, the German Jews, oh, so then it said the first generation could not obtain the more profound understanding of the traditions of Jewish faith. All right, makes sense. The German Jews, while inferior economically, came from a rich tradition of scholarship, unbroken by forced conversion. And I always find this so fascinating. Why was it that so many Spanish Jews were willing to convert, whereas the Jews in Germany and France, you know, in France at one point, but mostly, you know, coming in Germany and Austria, they would not ever convert. You know, they would rather give up their lives. I'll give it Hashem. But those just different cultures, different parts of the world and different attitudes. Look, their lives were endangered. No problem. It was the Inquisition, you know, which was murdering. If they were caught out, tortured, you know, I'm sure all those horrible instruments of torture, they all come from the Inquisition. So they're, you know, they had, their lives were full of jeopardy, you know, and people would be denouncing them. It was a terrible, you know, time period. So can't live in judgment of others, you know, what makes people make different decisions in life. The Sephardi Jews tried to rectify this situation by establishing schools to educate their young. All right, so now they realize, oh my gosh, we have to put greater stress on chinuch, right? So that our children will understand and know more about the Yahadus. Within a single generation, they had rabbis who were reared and trained in their own community. Unfortunately, some Jews drifted away from their former religious lives where they did not fully realize the reasoning behind their traditions. And a lot of that, you know, that in America, right? We've had incredible assimilation here because even if a child went to Hebrew school, what are they learning in Hebrew school? Minimal, right? And in Hebrew school used to be every day after public school. You would go to, like when I was growing up, you know, if you went to Hebrew school, you were there every day. No, then it's down to 2 days. Then now it's down just to the Sunday, you know. And a lot of it's like games, it's basic just stories. They don't understand the reasoning, you know, the magnificence, you know. So it's really, very, very sad. So now we're going to talk about two individuals, one of whom was quite famous, who are going to lead their Jews. Okay, so the first person whose name I have here is this Uriel da Costa, and his years, he lived from 1585 to 1640. Uriel was born in Portugal. Anybody ever here visit Portugal? Well, neither did I. So Porto is north of Lisbon. It is on the port, you know, it's on the Atlantic, right? But the wine, you know, port wine, that's where it comes from. It's made here in Porto, Portugal. And so again, this is kid, you know, comes to live there already, you know, steeped. Most of the family was usually there, so he's steeped in the Catholic faith. He was brought up for a career in the church. Consequently, he had studied a great deal of theology. Dissatisfied with Christianity, he secretly turned to Judaism, the faith of his ancestors. He made his way to Amsterdam, where he openly adopted Judaism. But all Uriel could see was an endless series of observances whose importance in the preservation of Jewish life he could not appreciate. His writings critical of Judaism brought down upon him the wrath of the Jews, and he was eventually excommunicated, right? According to him. He would not return to Christianity, yet he could not become reconciled to Judaism. This is very important. Unable to adjust to this untenable situation, he eventually committed suicide in 1640. He obviously was a very tortured personality. I mean, his mind, you know. Listen, I mean, I think most of you here, we grew up as Jews, and you know, we did have it, you know, an education of, you know, I mean, I never thought to question, you know, not living my Jewish life, but these people, you know, were raised in a certain way, and then they tried to adopt another. Obviously, many of them did, now, and were able to adapt to living a fully Jewish life. But you could see how tormented somebody could be. So very, very unfortunate. Now, this very famous person, Baruch Spinoza. I'm sure you have all heard of Spinoza. So, okay. His dates are 1632 to 1677, right? I only lived to be 45, so old. No sooner had the scandal of Rio de Costa been forgotten than a new scandal shook the Amsterdam community. For while Rio had sued Judaism because of inadequate early training and insufficient knowledge, Spinoza left Jewish life because of his individualistic whatever, train of thought that could find no place in organized religion. No, he didn't want anybody telling him what to do. Very independent thinker. All right. The Jewish community had high hopes for Spinoza. In the schools of the Sephardi community, again, he's a Spanish-Portuguese Jew, he had shown early promise of becoming an excellent rabbinic scholar. He was this brilliant man, and he is being raised as a Jew, and he goes to the yeshiva there, right? But obviously he's going to turn away from it. Meanwhile, his study of the Jewish philosophy led him to the study of philosophy in general. Remember that whole controversy with the Rambam, because the Rambam studied philosophy, and in certain parts of it, you know, he adopted Judaism. But for many people, then after the Rambam, they were highly critical of the Rambam because they said if you study general philosophy, it's going to turn you away. So here's a clear case where it did. And so at that time, philosophy was abandoning its interest in theology, okay, and was turning to the study of the natural sciences and of the human mind. So he's not leaving or being critical of Judaism because he's turning to another religion, but he, you know, relying on the idea of nature and physical world, you know, and that's what he's like. Spinoza started associating with a number of Christian friends and teachers. This thing is around the time period of like Erasmus, and the universities are being established. Soon the Jews were horrified to see that he no longer was observing the Jewish ceremonial laws. Here, this was this brilliant sort of yeshiva student, and all of a sudden he's not even practicing the mitzvah of the Torah. This was a danger for the newly established Jewish community. Its enemies might now point out that Judaism was fostering a lack of respect for religion and a disbelief in God, which was what he was advocating for. Again, he does it for himself. It wasn't like a proselytizer, but he was this brilliant man, and he wrote works, and that's what. And in certainly the non-religious Jewish world of the world in general, you know, they think Spinoza was this great philosopher and a wonderful person. The Sephardi community consequently placed Spinoza under the ban of excommunication, and just so you all know, Cherem was a really horrible situation because you could have nothing to do with the Jewish community. You could not even talk to a fellow Jew. So you met somebody on the street. No, they would totally like ignore you. So it was really a horrible existence for somebody. Rose adapted to his new lifestyle. He was obviously very inward person because of people. Earned a meager livelihood by grinding lenses. And he spent his time writing works on ethics and philosophy. That's why he's so, you know, greatly Jewish world, but, by other, even other Jews who are not Torah, they don't think, oh, he was a great man. That's why you hear. They also wrote a book about religion, which found no favor either in the Christian world or in the Jewish world. He denied that Jewish laws had any divine origin. I mean, this is really serious. You can understand that why they're putting Pharaoh. They were meant to strengthen Jewish solidarity and succeeded in the Jewish people. Something else, right? He also denied that the books of the Bible had actually been written by the men to whom they were ascribed. Like I don't know if you ever go to like the book of Yeshayahu, they actually divided up into 3 or 4 sections. Each part was written by somebody else. And even when it comes to the Torah, I don't think it's about the was important, everything, but the different individuals contributed to it. So his purely philosophical works show how much he had acquired from studying the works of former Jewish philosophers. He never questioned the unity of God and believed that everything in the world showed God's presence. So like I could see this mixture, this conglomeration of thought processes in this man. Okay, let me just finish up the last paragraph and we can do the rest. Except for DaCosta and Spinoza, the party community's answer there was thoroughly and loyally Jewish. For the first time in a good many centuries, Jewish life was fully accepted and Jews possessed the opportunities for free development. The Portuguese department of Holland, their sense of Jewish dignity not crushed by ghetto restrictions associated with their Jewish neighbors on terms of equality. So, I'm not saying that they were leaving their religion, but they're now having this close association, even with non-Jews. Without feeling the need for any modification of their Jewish institutions. So the bulk of them are, but there's always this danger when you start doing things like that would lead to similar. For example, first I told you there were 23 Jews, which consisted of men and children who came to America to Amsterdam. You're not going to hear about them after because they all intermarried. So it's very important. So hold on to these, right? Because we will continue the story about the Jews of Holland and the great rabbis, one in particular, who's quite famous. And we will go. Everybody be well. Oh, yes. So next Thursday, I'm having cataract. I know, I'm like nervous. Right. So, right, because I'm going to have my first eye done this coming Tuesday. So I'm going to teach next Tuesday. All right. And then we'll go back and I'll have a week where obviously it's healing and I can teach on Thursday, but the following week I have to have the other eye done. So that's what I'm going to teach Tuesday. All right. So I know it's going to be. Yeah, so it's going to be 2 times in the month of December on Tuesday. Next Tuesday. I think it's 10:15 to 11:15 next Tuesday. All right. And Thursday, you're free. All right, everybody be well. Bye-bye. My pleasure.